Good morning, my dear friends. We are learning the Sikha on Parshas Vayetze, the second one for this week, and it's Sikha Aleph in Chelek Chof. We are learning with a tefillah that we experience a tremendous nes and a Yeshua immediately for the abducted to come home safe in body and in mind and in spirit, and all those who need refuah shlema to have a complete refuah, and everybody should be safe in Eretz Yisrael and all around the world, and there should be an end to this terrible time. We're asking the Eibusha for refuah shlema for Harav Yosef Yitzchak ben Sima Chasya, and refuah shlema for Miriam Grimaldi. And I received 2 replies to my quest for simchas. One comes from our classmate Rachel Kaplan, who said, we get up in the morning and we do what we have to do, and we have the gezun to do it. That is a simcha, undoubtedly. So we thank the Eibishter for that. And somebody posted in our chat about a miracle that happened. It's very hard to know what to believe and what not to believe, and I certainly don't have the ability to corroborate this. But you can see in the chat, somebody shared a nes, and this should only be nisim and niflois, and in the most open and manifest way. Our sikha this morning is on the pasuk at the very beginning of Parshas Vayetze. It's the second pasuk in the parsha, and we're talking about Yaakov leaving Beersheba, going towards Haran. And the Torah says, "Vayifka b'makom, vayolen sham." He reached the place. He spent the night there. Kiva hashemesh, because the sun had set. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom. He took some of the stones of that place. Vayasem me rash shoisav, and he arranged them around his head. Vayishka b'makom hahu, and he lay down to sleep in that place. And the obvious question is, why do we need the word hahu? It's completely extra. Should have just said Vayishka b'makom, and he lay down to sleep there. And Rashi says, this is not a Rashi sikha, but just reading what Rashi says, Vayishka b'makom hahu is lashon miut. It's an exclusory term. Ba'asei makom shachav. It's true, Yaakov slept in that place. Aval yudal shanim shimesh beveis Ever, but for the 14 years that he studied in the house of Ever, loy shachav balayla shehaya oisek b'Torah. He did not lay down at night because he was involved in the study of Torah. That's Rashi on that pasuk. Now we begin the sikha. Ala pasuk vayashki b'makom hahu. On the pasuk, and he laid down there to sleep. Nemar b'medrash, kan shachav, aval kol yudal shana shahaya tamud beveis Ever loy shachav. Here he slept, but for the 14 years that he was sequestered in the yeshiva Shem Ever, he did not sleep. Ula'achar mikein muvaz dea nesefes, and afterwards the medrash brings another opinion. Kan shachav. Aval kol chav shana she'amad beveisei shel Lavan lo shachav. Here, Yaakov slept, but for the entirety of the 20 years that he lived in Lavan's house, he did not sleep. Kene'emar, like it says in our parsha, Vatidat shnasi be'enai, and basically it means sleep eluded me. Literally, the sleep drifted away from my eyes. And then the medrash continues to teach. And what did he say? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar Tesvav Shir Hamalish B'Sefer Tehillim. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught that what Yaakov said during the time that he was with Lavan were 15 prakim from Tehillim that are titled Shir Hamales. My taima, what's the reason? Shir Hamales David Lule Hashem Shahayalanu Yomer Na Yisrael. He said Shir Hamales because if not for Hashem being with us, David HaMelech said, and Yaakov felt the same way, then what would be? Bnei Yisrael have to remember this. And Yisrael is Saba, Yaakov Avinu, our grandfather Yaakov Avinu. And this is alluded to in this pasuk to what Yaakov Avinu said. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman said, Kol Sefer Tehillim haya emer. No, Yaakov Avinu said the whole Sefer Tehillim. Matam. Why do we say this? What do we base this on? Again, another pasuk. Va'ata kadosh yoshev tehilas Yisrael, and Yisrael is Yisrael Saba, is our grandfather Yisrael Yaakov. Now, mashmos hasha'ela umah haya omer, and what does it mean when the Medrash says, and what was Yaakov Avinu saying? Einena bameh haya Yaakov Avinu asuk beveis Lavan. The question is not what was he doing there that he didn't sleep. Because we know, because the Torah tells us, because in our parsha, we learn that he was busy day and night, ad kidei, so much so that by Yom he was busy with the sheep, balayla vatidat shnasi be'enai. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. No, because I just saw a comment flash in the chat, and it sounded like maybe, okay, all good. So we're not questioning what Yaakov did, because the pasuk tells us explicitly that he was busy day and night, and he didn't sleep at all because he was so punctilious with taking care of his duties for Lavan. And if you look at footnote 6, that we learn from this a halacha l'maisa. We learn from Yaakov Avinu that somebody who's an employee is obligated to work with all of his keiches for his employer. So the question of umeha ya'omer, what did he say, is not euphemistically what was he doing. So what does it mean? Ela hasha'elahi ma omar Yaakov. What did he say? Hispalel, lamad. What limed? What did he daven? What was he learning? Kedei sheyuchal lizgaber ala koshiyim b'charon or b'veis Lavan. That he should be able to overcome the difficulties of being in Haran and in the house of Lavan. Visham. Why do we want to know what he might have been learning, what he might have been davening? Because he was in a state of Golus. He went upon the command of his father Yitzchak to be in the house of Lavan. Visham hu asak b'tzoin Lavan, and there he busied himself with the sheep of Lavan. And if you look at the footnote, Laha'ir asher tzoin hu gam miloshen yitzia, that the biblical word tzoin, sheep, is related to the term yitzia, to leave, meaning michutz liYaakov, kedusha, that for Yaakov Avinu to be there, it was a leave taking of his normal space in kedusha. Ad asher shahusay beveis Lavan garmaloi liyarida midargasai, and so much so that spending time in the house of Lavan caused him a demotion in his spiritual level. Kedivrei Rashi, like Rashi explains, Yaakov Omar, Yaakov said, Im l'ramei suba, gam ani achil biramos. If Lavan is going to deal with me with trickery, I can be his brother in trickery. Meaning, Kaleimar, Shagam etzle heisa kav yachol ramos b'daimil ramos Lavan. That kav yachol, as it were, not literally, not actually, but Yaakov Avinu was broadcasting that he was capable of deceit. He was capable of deception and trickery, just like Lavan was. And that is not who Yaakov Avinu is, his default. So we see, based on this, that there was some kind of an effect that being in the house of Lavan could have on him. Therefore, he had to protect himself. Therefore, we're looking to see with what did he protect himself? What did he say? What was he learning? What was he davening? And because it was a precarious situation for him spiritually, Misareres Hasha'ela, the question arises, Keitzad hu itzliach lizgaber alagos. How indeed was Yaakov able to overcome his state of exile? Bivadei hayazeh be'emtzos hakol kol Yaakov, hamevatel es hayadayim, ves hamasnagdim liYaakov l'maisav, and surely he was able to surmount the difficulties through the agency of his voice, like Yitzchak said, hakol kol Yaakov, that the strength of Yaakov is his voice, which can obviate the strength of Esav's Yadayim, his hands, and all those that stand against Yaakov and what Yaakov has to accomplish. Ukedivrei Chazal, and as Chazal explained, v'lachein hasha'elahi mehaya omer. And therefore, since we realize that what he said, meaning what he was davening or what he was learning, was absolutely pivotal to his overcoming the difficulties that he faced in the house of Lavan, we're very interested to know exactly what was he saying. Ach yesh lahavin. Okay, so we have two opinions as to what he was davening. But we have to understand. Lafi hadeya shekol sefer Tehillim haya omer muvan hakesher shebein amiras Yaakov lebein hatkufa she'amad b'vayis Lavan. According to the Deya that he was saying Tehillim, he said the whole book of Tehillim, it's very clear. What was Yaakov doing? He was saying Tehillim. What do Yidden say? What do Yidden do when we're faced with a difficulty? We say Tehillim. Because logically speaking, Alpi Pashtos, he wasn't able to study Torah like he had been studying Torah in the yeshiva. So what was he able to do to stave off the onslaught of attack against him? He wasn't able to learn Torah, definitely not on the level that he had studied Torah very, very in depth when he was in the yeshiva Shem Be'eber. Who Amar LeKadosh Baruch Hu Tehillas Ke'ela Asher Aleihen Noit Limschar Kinigoim V'Ahalais. So what did he do? He said Tehillim, about which it says that when you say these Tehillim, it's like as if you were studying intricate laws about nigoim, about tzaras and other things that might come upon a person, and the laws about tuma and tara, where there's a whole discussion about if you find yourself under the same tent of somebody that became tamei, how does that affect you, and so on and so forth. So in other words, there is a teaching, and you could see that it comes from the Yalkut Shemaini on Tehillim, and from another source, which I'm forgetting, I should have written down. My husband told me what that footnote, what that acrostic stands for. But in any case, the Midrashim teach us that Tehillim can be reckoned upon you. You saying those Tehillim as if you study the most intricate halachas. Okay, so we understand why he's saying the whole book of Tehillim. Mawa kesher hamiyuchad shebein tesvav shir hamalish b'sefer Tehillim levei matzavai beveis lava. But if we go according to the opinion that he was saying 15 prakim, those certain 15 prakim, what's the connection between those prakim of Tehillim and his general situation in the house of Lavan, which he is trying to surmount spiritually. So the Rebbe says, "Kidei lahavin zeis, yesh lahaktim es divrei hachida." In order to understand this, we have to preface with the words of the Chida. Shetesvav shir hamalais, Amar David Olav Hashalom, keneged tesvav shanim, shechayu ha'avos biyachad. That these 15 shir hamalais, David HaMelech Olav Hashalom said, paralleling the 15 years that the avos, that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were in this world together. So there were 15 years where there were these three aspects in an overlay in this world. Shari Avram Avinu chai 100 shana v'shivim shana v'chamesh shanim. Avram Avinu lived 175 years. Yitzchak noilad kasher Avram haya ben 100. Yitzchak was born when Avram was 100 years old. V'Yaakov noilad kasher Yitzchak haya ben 60 shana. And Yaakov was born when Yitzchak was 60 years old. Vayetze shehayu tesvav shanim shechayu avos biyachad. So there were 15 years where all three of the avos were in this world together. Ulefizeh nitan loymar sheYaakov amar as tesvav shir hamalish b'sefer Tilim k'dei la'orer al yidei kach gam es zchuyoseim shel avosav Avram v'Yitzchak. So now we can say that Yaakov said these 15 prakim and Tehillim, the 15 shir hamalais, in order to arouse the schusim of his fathers, Avram and Yitzchak. Kilaymar, that is to say, shebenoisav l'schuyosav v'koychosav shaloi, in addition to his schusim and his powers and his energies, yinasnu loy gam koychoseim shel Avram v'Yitzchak. He asked that the kayches, that the energy and the strength of Avram and Yitzchak should also be bestowed to him. V'daf gal yidei kach hu yachol haya lizgaber ala akoshiyim beveis Lavan, and it's specifically through the kayches of his fathers, Avram and his grandfather and his father, that he'll be able to overcome the difficulties of the house of Lavan. Kidvarov. Lulei Elekei Avi Elekei Avram Upachad Yitzchak Hayali, and these words are in our parsha, where Yaakov Avinu says, if not for the God of my father, the God of Avram and Yitzchak, where would I be? Gimel. As hasiba lekach sheYaakov niskak l'schusam shel kol ha'avos kedei lizgaber al nisyonis beveis Lavan, and the reason the Yaakov Avinu needed the schusim of the other avos in order to overcome the challenges that waited and were with him in the house of Lavan, nitan lahavim min ha'etze hanisenes kedei lenatzer b'melchemes hayetze bechlal. We can understand this through the counsel that is offered in order to overcome the milchama and the challenges that we generally have with the Yetzer Hara. Asher nilmedes min milchama kipshuta asher hisrachasha b'tkufas Admar Zaken. And we learn this from a war that took place during the time of the Alter Rebbe. And in the chat, I posted information about this war. I thought about going through it together, but I have no additional knowledge to offer than what is offered in that link. So I thought it didn't really make much sense for me to present myself as an expert on that or anything else. And but there's also a link to a class that Rabbi Taub gave where he references this war. So I definitely recommend and encourage everyone to follow that link and listen to that. So the Rebbe cites that based on that war, that generally when wars are waged, Mechalkim kol echad hachayil shaloi legimel chalakim. The troops are divided into three groups. Chelek echad be'emtza, you put one in the middle, and then you put two platoons, you flank them on the right and the left. V'chein misader gam hatzad shekenegdo legimel chalakim ke'elu v'nilchamim elu mul elu. And when you wage a war, that's generally what's done. So it ends up that these three groups of troops are fighting each other face to face. And the victory that was achieved at that time, at that war, but how was that particular war that the Alter Rebbe references that was waged during his time, how was it won? By diverting from the normal strategy where one platoon faces another and fights that one-on-one, but instead having all three converge on one of the enemy. Okay, so you take all of your assets and you train them and you focus them on 1/3 of the assets of the enemy. And in this way, you're definitely able to overcome. And from this, we can learn a lesson, we can adopt a lesson, we can reappropriate this to our milchama with the Yetzer Hara. Kedei l'natzeach hasayetzer tzarich la'er es kol gimel midas tikdusha. In order to win over the Yetzer Hara, you have to marshal the strength of the three holy midas, ava, yira, v'rachamim, or chesed, gevura, teferes, le'umas mida achas deklipa. So you take all three and you focus them against one midah of klipa, and in this way, you'll definitely be able to make the enemy fall and to be victorious over the enemy. Yesh loymar as tesvav shir hamalis asher heim keneged tesvav shanim shechayu ha'aves biyachad ulizgaber alagos. And so therefore, it now makes sense that Yaakov Avinu said the tesvav shir hamalis that allude to the 15 years that the avos were all in this world, that all lived together. And in this way, lizgaber ala golos, and in this way to overcome and surmount over the golos. Why? Because shloishes ha'avos him keneged shloish hamidas dekdusha. Because we know famously that each one of the avos was the embodiment of one of these midas. So Avram is ava chesed, Yitzchak is gevura pachad yira, and Yaakov Avinu is teferes rachamim. Because sher yesh es shloshtam biyachad, and when you have all three together, k'lemar melachdim yachdav is called shloish hamidas tikdusha. When you consolidate, when you mass all of these holy modalities, these holy midas, az nitan hakoyach lizgaber al kol nisyones hagolos ulevatlam. Then we tap into the energy that allows us to overcome all of the difficulties and the challenges and the tests of Golos and to completely obviate them. Lefizeh yesh lahasbir. So based on this, we can explain Lefi HaChasidus as haremez b'hadiyuk b'mispar tesvav shir hamalos. So now the Rebbe says we're now in a position to look at something that is alluded to in the number tesvav al pi Chasidus, the tesvav shir hamalos, the tesvav shanim shechayu avos biyachad, and the 15 years that the avos lived simultaneously at the same time. Hamisbar tesvav meira al shtei ha'isiyos harishonos shel shem havaya. the number 15 points us in the direction of the first two letters of the Shem Havaya, the Yud and the Hey. And the Yud and the Hey together are the Gematria Tezvav. They add up to 15. Now, Hahevdel bein Yud Hey levein Vav Hehu, and what's the difference between the first two letters of the Shem Havaya and the latter two letters of the Shem Havaya? Sha'ais yes Vav Hey hein bifchinas midos umalchus. The second two letters of the Shem Havaya, the Vav and the Hey, they teach about, they point to, they embody the midos and malchus. The Isis Yud Hey hein bifchinas moichin. The Yud is always an allusion to Chachma. Its tiny physical size alludes to the first seminal drop, that flash of an idea, and the Hey, the larger physical aspect of it, alludes to Bina, how an idea is expounded upon and developed and goes through gestation, as it were. And now we have an additional strata of understanding this idea of the 15 years that the Avos lived, all of them together in this world. In order for their modalities to be revealed together, Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes, Hayu Avos biyachad tzarich laha'ir b'midos or hameichin the Yud-Hey. In order for the midos to be manifest, there has to be the Yud-Hey, the light of their cognition has to be in this world, has to be revealed. Why? Kevan shahameichin na'alim me'eschalko shel hamidos, because the cognition is higher than the way in which the midos kind of get separated and variated. And because the meichin, because the cognition transcends the midos, it is able to effectuate a combination. And if this is ringing a bell to you, last week's Sikha about Avram's Chesed and Yitzchak Gevurah, and how there could be a Hiskalulus, and how there could be a combination. But we have to be careful, because this Hiskalulus is not the same thing as a mixture. Okay, so like Tiferes is a mixture of Chesed and Gevurah. Hiskalulus is the ability for them to, I don't know if it's really a dirty word, especially now, but maybe intersectionality, like holding space for these two things at the same time, but not the way in which they become a third thing, a mixture. And if you look at footnote 21, the Rebbe cites that in the Likutei Torah, Alter Rebbe teaches Sheyakov hu Tiferes, Shemechaber Chesed u'Gevurah, v'lachein hu ba'avdei gol hu bilvadei golal ha'even me'al pi ha'be'er. So in that scene where he meets all the shepherds, and they say they all have to get together to roll the stone off, but then Yaakov is able to roll it off himself. Alter Rebbe says that this is because he had the combination of Chesed and Gevurah Tiferes. Aval ein stira mizeh l'ma shekasav b'fnim ki ikar hanitzachon hu davka kasheyesh gam hakaven Chesed u'Gevurah k'moi shehem b'fnei atzmam v'lo rak k'moi shechlulim b'Tiferes. The Rebbe says, but this is not a stira to what we're saying here, because Tiferes is a combination. But what the Rebbe is saying here is that you need all three standing, each one in their own modality, and yet working in tandem, but not the way in which they become one mixture. Lefize yesh. Oh, okay. V'zeu hahesber letes vav shonim shechayu avis biyachad. No, I'm sorry. We did that. We're up to hey. I lost my place. Achadayan ein dai bekach. But this is still not enough. Why? Seemingly. Tesvav shirei hamale shebesefer Tehillim nikroim b'shem shir. Hakashro l'simcha. The Tesvav shir hamales are called song. And song is always connected to joy. The Ketzad Yachal Haya Yaakov Lema Shir Hamale Shira B'Yosef B'Matzav Shel Golus. So we have to understand, we know that song is an outgrowth of joy. How is it possible that Yaakov was in a place of joy while he was in Golus in the house of Lavan, that he was saying the Shir Hamales? However, B'Mismorim Elu Medubar Al Ezri. Nesinas Hakayach Lizgaber Alagos. It's true that in these Mizmarim it talks about my help, the infusion of strength to overcome the Galus. So we can understand that on some level there is joy that comes from referencing Ezri, my help, my support, my salvation, Hashem. But how can you talk about there being revealed simcha while in a state of difficulty and Golus? And it's only in a state of real simcha, shirak oz matim loy mashira. That's the only time that it really is considered the time where you could break out a song. Kemaimer Chazal, ein oim shira ela layayin. Like Chazal taught, you only sing when you've had wine, and presumably you're indulging in wine when you're in a state of happiness. So is this possible? Whilst Yaakov was found in Haran, which is called Haran Av Shel Makayim, this was spiritually a place that angered Hashem, and he was in the house of Lavan. But the explanation, the answer to this is Yeridas Yaakov Avinu lebeis Lavan haisa l'tzarech ha'aliyah. The whole thing that Yaakov went down to the house of Lavan was for an ascension that he would achieve. L'tzarech vayifrei tzaish ma'id ma'id, in order for him to become very rich, literally and most importantly spiritually. V'kevon sheYaakov ra es mataras yiridasai, es ha'aliyah shetitzmach mikach, and because he saw the reason for which he was descending, the goal, and he saw the ascension, the aliyah that would flower from his descent. L'chein hu amar b'Yosef b'beis Lavan shir hamales. So therefore, he was already saying shir hamales. He was already bursting in song, even while he was in the house of Lavan. And this whole idea is expressed and with greater strength, is underscored in the beginning. And so it is here. Mizbataz ha'aliyah hanigremes be'emtzos ha'yirida legolus berishain mibei tesvav shir hamales. Just like in general, the beginning of everything expresses its main idea. We also have the same idea about the end. The beginning and the end are where the fullness of the idea is found. So too is it here, that we find that the fullness or the potency or the concentration of what would happen through the agency of this Yerida is found in the Tesvav Shir Hamalis. Siyumai shel Shir Hamalis Harishain. The end of the first Shir Hamalis. And the Rebbe tells us, V'akol halach achar hachitum, and this is something that the Rebbe would constantly cite, that the Gemara says that everything follows the end. In other words, the end has to be strong. That's the pasuk. Hamashmazi, and what is the understanding of this pasuk? That despite the fact that Yaakov Avinu, that Yidden are interested, that David HaMelech is interested in Shalom, they're coming to fight with me. They're coming in a milchama against me. How very relevant these words are to us today. Milchama ruchanizu hiahelem va'hester shebitkufas hagolus. And this ongoing milchama that we face, although all we are seeking is peace, is the way in which Hashem is shrouded and obscured and obfuscated during Golus. Ubimyuchad hanisyones hamoinim umafriim ba'avodas Hashem uboim lilachim negdai. And especially this is expressed in the challenges and the tests that prevent us and bother us from engaging in avodas Hashem. They come to wage war against us, against David HaMelech, against Yaakov. Uba'amar yashir hamalais al hema lemilchama. And so by saying shir hamalais on those that mass against us in war, mudgeshes hahis alus ha'atzuma shenigremes be'emtzoas hamilchama. You underscore the awesome ascension that is possible only through the agency of a war. And the truth of the matter is that this is really the whole Inyan Chassidus of why a neshama has to come into this world altogether. The neshama has to come into this world to be twinned with, married to the nefesh habahamis. And only through the agency of the clash and the tension and the conflict with the nefesh habahamis does the nefesh eliki achieve ascension. Because Alter Rebbe explains, nefesh eliki doesn't need tikkun, but it needs aliyah. And the only way it can get its aliyah is through being forced to fight the nefesh habahamis. Hezber lekachu asur liyehudi lahachnis es atzmei lematzav shel nisyonos. The explanation is that a Jew is not permitted to put themselves into a situation of nisyonos, of tests. Ulehefach alav levakish. On the contrary, every single morning we get up and we beg, Al tivi enu l'dei nisayon. Don't bring us to nisayon. L'chein hu eimer ani shalom. That's why a Yid says, I am peace. Hu me'unyan ba'avoda haruchanis ba'ofen shel shalom l'loi milchama v'nisyonos. We just want to serve Hashem. We are interested in a spiritual field of peace, without milchama, without challenges. Ach limreis. But despite this, mipnei hahis alos hanigremes dafka al yedei milchama v'nisyonos. But because of the ascension that can be achieved and can be accessed specifically only through the war and the challenges, Yotzer HaKadosh Baruch Hu lif'amim masav shehema boim lihilachim bi. Hashem creates a situation at certain times where others come to do war with us. Shebein hema b'lashon rabim, and hema is in plural. Olam hazeh gashmi shenikra rishus harabim. It is referring to this whole plane called this physical world, which is a rishus harabim. It is characterized by multiplicity, by multifariousness, by the variety and the the tremendous amount of pulls and pushes. And the Eibishter creates this Hema yiyu asher yavoyu lilachim el hafriya b'avodas Hashem, that they come to bother us and to disturb us in our avodas Hashem. You know, I'm really sorry, but I skipped a really important footnote. If it's okay to go back to footnote 29. So let's, forgive me. So let's read again that part of the Sikha. We're going back to the last paragraph of Seif Hey. The Rebbe is asking, how could Yaakov Avinu say Shira when he's by Lavan? He's in Charan. HaHezber lekachu. Explanation is Yeridas Yaakov Avinu lebeis Lavan ha'isel tzarech ha'aliyah. Yaakov Avinu going into the house of Charan was for the purpose of ascension. Litzarech va'yifar teish ma'id ma'id. For the purpose of his becoming very great, physically, spiritually. And because Yaakov Avinu saw what the reason was for his going down, he saw he saw the ascension, the greatness, the elevation that would spring forth from this. That's why he was able to say, and he said in the house of Lavan Shir Hamalis, footnote 29. Laha'ir Mimaimer Chazal, Seif Makais. The Rebbe kocht very, very much in this. That Rabbi Akiva was with other Tanoim, they were crying, and he was laughing when he saw the Chorban. And Chassidus explains, and Ketesichas is explained, Shehu Mishum Shadafka Hu Ra B'Toikev Hagolus Es Ha'ilui Sheba Mizeh B'Hagula. The Rebbe explains that Yaakov Avinu laughed when they were crying, because when he saw the profundity of the Golus, he saw the greatness of what would come in the Geula. Ulaha'ir Mikisvei HaRizal, and the Rebbe brings down that Rizal taught Rabbi Akiva hu Gilgul v'oisi ois Yaakov. That Rabbi Akiva is a Gilgul of Yaakov, and you see it in the letters of their names are the same. So I thought that was very interesting and not something we should skip. Now we're going to the last paragraph of Seif Vav. My apologies. Valkachu Aimer Shir Hamalis. And so therefore Yaakov Avinu said Shir Hamalis. Not only will these challenges not prevent him in his avodas Hashem from achieving what he must, and it doesn't even weaken his avodas Hashem, but it's opposite. They added to him strength in a doubled and redoubled fashion, and this brought him to burst forth in song. I saw something in the chat. Yeah, Chana, I think it's the same idea. And there's a famous sikha where the Rebbe speaks about this, about soldiers going out to war singing. Yeah, Joni, that seems what the Rebbe is saying, that we are brought challenges to poke us, to bother us, for the greatness that will ensue from this. Yeah, for sure we have to know that it's from Hashem. You're saying it's so hard to swallow, laden with guilt, that you're here and others are there. But again, Chassidus teaches us, the Rebbe never tired of reminding us that Hashem mitzadei gover. You're sitting in Montreal because that's where Hashem put you. There's nothing to feel guilty about. It's just a matter of we have to find what is our shlichus where we are. There's no guilt here. And guilt is corrosive and it doesn't do anything for anybody. But to find, why am I at this front? Because we're all on a front.
But we're human.
Yeah, but Chassidus takes our human factor and tries to raise us.
Still, I just don't get it. I mean, it's not for me to get. It's just when you know people there and and you're involved. It's not abstract. It's not people that we don't know.
Right.
Whatever. Anyway, keep going.
You're a good woman, Charlie Brown. Yeah, we should all be bothered, but we can't afford that. That's what the Rebbe taught us. We cannot afford that. We have too much work to do. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be sad, but that we need to channel it. Zayin. Kol inyan b'Torah hu hera nitzchis. Everything in Torah, every Inyan is an eternal lesson. Umikach move on. So it's understood from this Shekol Amar Le'il Hu Hira L'Chol Tkufas Hagolos, that everything described above is a lesson for every time in Golos. V'Hira Miyuchedes L'Tkufasenu Koishi Hagolos Dara De'ikvisa De'Mashicha. And this is a specific Hira for our time, for the difficulty of the Golos in this generation, where we can hear the footsteps, we can hear Mashiach coming. When we begin to think and contemplate the double and redoubled darkness of this generation, and we are fully in permitted. There is place al piteri to say from where is going to come our salvation. And at such a time, alulim lahagia l'deyosh chas v'shalom. It is very possible it is that we will fall into depression, chas v'shalom. Ach ha'hira hanalmedes min ha'amor here. But the lesson that we learn from what we've been discussing is Yeridas Yisrael legolos shadoima levayetze Yaakov elech harana hilitzayach aliyah, are going into Golos, which is what happened to Yaakov when he left from Canaan. He left from Eretz Yisrael to go to Haran, af apay shel makom. It's for an aliyah. Kedei sheyeh yisran ha'or min ha'choshech v'yisran lachachma min hasichlos. That there should be greater light that comes out of the darkness, that there should be greater chachma that comes out of the folly. Therefore, we have to lift our eyes upwards. We have to raise our eyes. We have to raise our perspective to look at the tachlis of the golos. And to see the great elevation that is coming in the Geula for us. Not only will we not be scared and brought into a state of panic from the darkness of the Golos, but on the contrary, we'll be in a state of manifest joy. We'll be able to sing. Chas v'sholom, Joni, loymar, sheyesh l'smayach im hagolos v'lachshev shezeu hamatzav haroyer liYisrael. Chas v'sholom, chas v'chalila, that we should be joyous with the golos, in the golos, and to think that this is a proper situation for Klal Yisrael. Lehefach, on the contrary, Golus hi choshech v'sichlus u'kedoimeh. Choshech is darkness. Choshech is folly, etc., etc. Va'al ha'Yehudi begolus oimeres ha'Torah b'meforish ben shegola me'al shulchan aviv hamela. And in describing a Jew in Golus, we find the Gemara famous analogy that it is like a prince that has been banished from his father's table. And if the prince feels differently or speaks about this differently, that's when you can recognize just how utterly dark and how devolved is the gullus of this child, that he doesn't feel that he's been banished from the table of the king. So on one hand, we have to feel the darkness of the gullus and the difficulty, and we have to feel every moment the betrayal and the hurt of a prince being banished from the table of a king. But we have to contemplate the matara, the goal. That there has to emerge from this greater light that comes from darkness, greater light that comes from the folly. And when we contemplate in this way, when we train our thought process in this way, then we're able to reveal and we're able to feel the answer to our existential question, from where will come our salvation. And the Rebbe says, from where will come the salvation? B'she'elezu atzma. The answer comes from the question. Lifi perusha hapnimi, according to the Hasidic understanding of ayin. Sha'ezen nimshach midargas ayin. That Hashem's salvation comes from the level of ayin. L'dargazu efshar lahagia. Hinalis misechel mehavana. This level of ayin is a level that is impossible to arrive to. It's impossible to access. It transcends our seichel. It transcends our ability to understand. It transcends the other names of Hashem. But then this transcendent light, this transcendent level from which comes the geula, the salvation, comes down into Seder Hishtalshalus, and it comes down in a revealed way, umashpia sham, and it affects there, Ezri me'im Hashem, oisei shamayim va'aretz, and it permeates and is revealed ad l'shamayim v'la'aretz kipshutam, until heaven and earth, very, very literally and physically speaking, and may Hashem have rachmanis on us that this should happen immediately, because it's already impossible to bear every single day the faces of more worlds that are being shattered. Not to mention, there's so many that we lost, and there's so many that we don't know. So we have to see the Ezer already from Ayin. Amen El Kaleya, Besuras Teves for all of us, wherever we are.